Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Hayley failed in her elaborate deception involving a fake pregnancy. What started as a calculated move to manipulate emotions and control narratives quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous. The moment Hayley provoked Danny, triggering a fierce and emotional confrontation, she thought she had won. Her goal was to appear fragile, a victim in a tragic miscarriage, painting Danny as the aggressor. And for a moment, it looked like it would work. Hayley was rushed to the hospital, clutching her stomach, tears in her eyes, already rehearsing the story she'd deliver. But Hayley never expected Danny to act so fast. Within minutes of the hospital admission, Danny placed a call to Bill. The moment Danny said Hayley's name and mentioned the hospital, a quiet fuse lit beneath everything Hayley had built. Bill was on his way before Hayley even had time to clean up the mess. Hayley had been playing with fire. Faking a pregnancy wasn't just risky, it was an act of war. She believed the illusion was enough. A few printed ultrasound images pulled from the internet. Carefully planned mood swings. A strategic weight gain. She had rehearsed every detail, imagining each layer of sympathy that would fall like armor around her. What she didn't calculate was how fragile the lie really was when real eyes were watching. Ashley was one of the first to raise red flags. She had seen Hayley up close, stayed in the same house, sat through doctor's appointments that Hayley always rescheduled or canceled at the last minute. Ashley was never cruel, just curious. And when Naomi asked, Ashley finally said what had been troubling her for weeks. I never saw her pregnant. Not once. No real symptoms. No ultrasounds. Nothing. This revelation hit Naomi like a slap. She had been cautious with Hayley, always suspecting her motivations, but never wanting to believe she would sink so low. Still, Ashley's words planted a seed. Naomi began to investigate quietly. Within days, she discovered that Hayley had never had a legitimate sonogram taken at the hospital. The files were either fabricated or stolen. Why would Hayley go this far? Naomi asked herself over and over. Was it truly just to hurt Danny? To win Bill's unwavering attention? Or was there something else? Something darker? Bill, meanwhile, had been torn between trust and denial. Hayley had always been manipulative, but she was also a survivor. He admired her strength, her resilience. But the hospital incident unraveled something in him. He began to see the cracks in her story. The dramatics. The timing. The way she flinched when asked for details. And now, with Naomi presenting clear evidence, he could no longer ignore the truth. Bill confronted Hayley in private. No raised voice. Just a heavy silence, followed by a single question. Why? Hayley didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood still, breathing heavily, her face unreadable. Because you wanted a child more than anything, she finally said. And I couldn't give it to you. Not ever. The room fell quiet. She told him everything. How she found out she was infertile a year ago and never told anyone. How that revelation broke her. How it twisted her logic. She feared Bill would leave, feared he would look for someone else to give him a family. So she crafted a solution, a fake pregnancy, a tragic loss, and a shared trauma that would bind them forever. But what she didn't account for was Danny. Danny's reaction. Danny's decision to call Bill. She had tried to provoke Danny into exploding into being the villain. But Danny, fueled by rage and righteousness, became the catalyst for the truth. Now Hayley was exposed. There was no more hiding. The community whispered. Friends pulled away. Even those who once defended her now stared at her like a cautionary tale. Naomi, still stunned by the depth of the deception, asked Ashley if there were more lies. Ashley quietly nodded. She discovered that Hayley had researched ways to alter hospital databases. That the images Hayley presented to Bill as proof were altered using editing software. That she had tried, at one point, to bribe a nurse to confirm a non-existent appointment. The depth of manipulation horrified Naomi. It wasn't just a prank. It was an operation. And yet, despite all of this, the question lingered, what would Bill do? He didn't react publicly. For days, he avoided appearances. Then, finally, he emerged with a short statement. He said he was taking time to evaluate matters privately. No mention of Hayley. No denials. No defenses. Just a cold pause. People speculated. Would he walk away entirely? Would he press charges? Or, as some guessed, would his love for Hayley somehow override the betrayal? There was a theory circulating among fans that Bill might eventually forgive her. That despite everything, his love ran deep enough to offer redemption. Maybe not now, but later. And with that, some suggested an alternative path, surrogacy. If the desire to have a child was still real, maybe they could pursue that route. It sounded logical, clinical. But emotionally, the wound was raw. Hayley, for her part, began to wither under the scrutiny. Without her web of lies to protect her, she was bare. She moved out of the main house. She stopped attending events. She canceled her social media. And the worst part? She still hoped Bill would understand. Deep down, she knew it was a long shot. But in her mind, it wasn't just a scam. It was a desperate act from someone who had already lost too much. Someone who believed, wrongly or not, that love was something you had to fight dirty for. Naomi, watching from a distance, didn't feel triumph. She felt grief. For the trust lost. For the people caught in the crossfire. And most of all, for Hayley, who might never truly understand how deeply she had damaged everything around her. There was still more to uncover. More conversations to be had. And the fallout had only just begun. Because some lies don't just end with truth. They end with consequences. The days following the exposure of Hayley's deception rippled like shockwaves through everyone connected to the chaos. Bill, still reeling from the enormity of the betrayal, withdrew from nearly every aspect of public life. While speculation about his next move grew louder, he kept his silence. But behind closed doors, he was working through something far more complicated than anger. It was grief not for the child that never existed, but for the woman he thought he knew. Naomi, caught between loyalty and truth, found herself in a difficult position. She didn't want to alienate Bill, but she also refused to ignore what Hayley had done. Ashley became her anchor during this storm. With calm precision, Ashley helped Naomi collect everything they knew, every false record, every misleading detail. Naomi didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. Closure. Something Hayley had taken from all of them. Danny, meanwhile, was left in a strange limbo. While she had every right to feel vindicated, the emotional toll was heavy. The trap that had been set for her, the blame she could have carried, and the trauma of being manipulated into playing the villain weighed heavily on her. It wasn't just her reputation on the line. It was her peace of mind. She began attending therapy, trying to separate the anger from the guilt. What Hayley had done wasn't just cruel, it was surgical. And Danny had walked right into it. Hayley, now isolated, faced a different reality. She was no longer in control. The narrative wasn't hers to manipulate. And worse, she was starting to understand how deeply she'd failed. She wasn't hated because of the lie itself, but because of the damage it inflicted on people who genuinely cared about her. In private, she admitted to herself that part of her plan had always been self-sabotage. She knew it was only a matter of time before her infertility would be exposed, and rather than face the vulnerability of honesty, she opted for performance. One morning, Bill contacted her. No lawyers. No intermediaries. Just a message, "We need to talk." They met at the edge of the property they once shared, where the trees cut out most of the view and the silence felt natural. Hayley waited, unsure if she would be screamed at or dismissed. But when Bill arrived, he looked neither furious nor forgiving. He looked tired. "You didn't trust me," he said. "That's what hurt the most." Hayley nodded. "I didn't trust anyone." He asked her plainly if she wanted a future with him. No drama. No theatrics. Just truth. Hayley hesitated. Then she said, "I don't know how to want something in a healthy way anymore." Bill understood the implication. There was no healing without accountability. And while part of him still loved her, another part knew that love wasn't a good enough reason to rebuild something broken at its foundation. Still, he didn't walk away. Not entirely. He proposed something radical, counseling. Not as a couple, but individually, with the possibility of revisiting their relationship after enough time and effort had passed. And then, if they still wanted children, maybe they could talk about surrogacy. Hayley didn't know how to respond. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection either. It was a challenge, a rare second chance that didn't come with shortcuts. Naomi, when she heard about it, wasn't sure what to think. She worried Bill was falling back into old patterns, letting his heart override his sense. But Ashley surprised her with a different perspective. Maybe he's giving her the only thing she never gave herself, a path to redemption. As the weeks went on, Hayley did begin therapy. She admitted things she had never said aloud. The pressure of never being enough. The fear of abandonment. The hollow identity she built around being desired but never truly seen. Her therapist didn't let her off the hook. She made Hayley confront every manipulation, every lie, and the real cost of her actions. Danny, still in recovery from her own trauma, reached out to Naomi with an idea. What if we did a joint interview? To set the record straight, Naomi hesitated. It felt risky, but she saw the potential. This wasn't about revenge. It was about control. Reclaiming the narrative from gossip and giving people a truthful, human story. They spoke candidly in the interview. About trust. About betrayal. About being used as pawns. It went viral. And while it brought them both sympathy, it also forced people to confront just how much damage unchecked manipulation could do. Hayley saw the interview. Alone. At night. She cried for reasons she didn't understand. Not because she was the villain, but because it reminded her that she had once been a real person before she became a symbol of scandal. Eventually, the public outrage faded. The story wasn't forgotten, but people moved on. New scandals emerged. New obsessions replaced the old ones. But the people involved were forever changed. Bill, cautiously optimistic, began discussions with a surrogacy agency. He didn't include Hayley, not yet. He told her it was something he needed to pursue on his own, without lies or pressure. If, in time, she proved herself capable of being a stable partner, he would revisit the possibility. Hayley, for once, didn't push back. She accepted the distance. And deep down, she felt something foreign, relief. For the first time in years, she wasn't playing a role. She was simply existing. And that, in its own way, felt like progress. Naomi continued her work, focusing on advocacy for women who had been manipulated or silenced in similar ways. Ashley partnered with her, turning what started as quiet support into public action. Danny returned to her writing, using her voice to unpack the experience in a powerful essay that was later adapted into a short documentary. Hayley watched it. Every word. Every frame. She didn't reach out. Not to apologize. Not to explain. She knew some things had to remain broken. But in her own quiet way, she began rebuilding. Not to reclaim a place in anyone's life, but to find out who she really was beyond the lie. And that was a beginning, even if it came at the end of everything else. Though the public fascination with Hayley's scandal had faded, the personal consequences remained sharp. Bill had moved forward with his surrogacy journey, working with a reputable agency and a woman named Elise, whose calm demeanor and honest outlook brought a refreshing clarity to everything Bill had been missing. He wasn't looking for romance, but with Elise, things felt simple, earnest, grounded in truth. Hayley continued therapy, but her progress was uneven. She would show up, participate, reveal hard truths, and then spiral on the days when regret clawed at her. It was on one of those days that she typed a letter. Not to Bill or Naomi or Danny, but to the child she had once pretended to carry. She wrote about the emptiness she tried to fill, the love she tried to force, and the truth she ran from. It wasn't a confession meant to be read. It was something she needed to say out loud, even if no one would hear it. She folded the letter and tucked it in a drawer. Naomi, meanwhile, had started mentoring young women who'd been in manipulative relationships not unlike the emotional maze Hayley had constructed. She found purpose there, and even a kind of forgiveness. Not for Hayley exactly, but for herself. For all the time wasted trying to believe people were better than they were. Ashley stayed close, loyal in her quiet, unshakable way. She and Danny formed a cautious friendship, bonded by survival. They'd been pitted against each other in Hayley's narrative, but outside of the drama, they discovered common ground. They both knew what it meant to be doubted, misunderstood, weaponized. The short documentary Danny helped produce was nominated for a regional journalism award. In her acceptance speech, she said something that stuck with everyone watching. When truth is twisted long enough, even the person who speaks it starts to sound insane. So we owe it to each other to keep listening, even when the story hurts. Bill watched the speech live. He didn't cry, but something in his chest shifted. He called Danny a week later, not to reopen wounds, but to thank her. They met for coffee. Talked like people who had once walked through fire and now stood on the other side with matching scars. Meanwhile, Elise was nearing her second trimester. Bill attended every appointment. When he heard the heartbeat for the first time, it hit him like a wall of emotion he hadn't expected. It was real. It wasn't built on lies. He shared the moment with no one, but later, when he was alone, he wrote a single sentence in his journal: "This is the family I build with truth." And yet, Hayley lingered. She didn't interfere. Didn't ask questions. But she was still part of the story. People still stared when she entered a room. Some with pity. Some with disgust. Some, surprisingly, with curiosity. There were whispers that she might write a memoir or speak publicly about her mental health. But Hayley had no interest in being a cautionary tale or a redemption arc for media consumption. What she did do was disappear for a while. She moved out of state. Took a job at a nonprofit that worked with women who struggled with infertility. No one recognized her there, and she never offered up her past. She listened. She helped. She kept her story folded like that letter in the drawer, private, painful, and hers alone. One spring morning, Bill received a package. No return address. Inside was a single envelope, and inside that, a photo. It was a landscape of a mountain valley at sunrise, painted in soft watercolor. On the back was a single sentence, written in Hayley's handwriting: "There is beauty in rebuilding from nothing." He didn't reach out. He didn't need to. Because in his heart, he knew she meant it. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.